Here are some gap and go trades that I am tracking for Tuesday, December 26th through Friday, December 29th. First up, NNDM. I do own this. We ended the week at $2.40. To the north side from where we are takes us to 2 standard deviations and a gap fill starting at 245. It closes out at roughly 246. It's just a tiny little one. Now above that at 3 standard deviations, 248. Another gap opens at 249, another level of resistance, 251, and that gap closes to the north side at 252. To the south side, back at the middle of the trend, takes us to support at 239. Below that, at another level of support and a potential buy-in area, 232, 230, and 227. Again, this is the period that I am tracking from here to here, the 29th. And right now we're going down. So make sure you pay attention to the RSI and the MACD and look for these gaps. But once they close out, I will anticipate a sell-off because we will be at resistance. And then make sure you also look for any gaps to the downside that are in this time frame. The next one is NIO. I've talked about this many times in the past. We ended the week at $8.42, up more than 1.5%. To the north side from where we are takes us to resistance at $8.70. The gap closes out at $8.82. And 3 standard deviations is $8.94. And 4 standard deviations takes us to $9.18. We do have another gap that I've been tracking right here, starting at roughly 962, closes out at 1030. I do own this, and I will be selling some shares at $10.30. Now, to the south side from where we are, takes us to the middle of the trend and support at 822. Negative 2 standard deviations, 774, 749. A small gap forms at 747, closes out at roughly 743, and at negative 4 standard deviations and definitely a buy-in area, $7.26. If we hit these lines, I will anticipate a bounce as people buy the dip. But if we are down here also, because it is at support, that is why I will anticipate it to go up. And typically when a gap fills, if it fills to the downside, it'll rip up. And if it fills to the upside, it will crash because it's usually at resistance. Now, SOFI. We ended the week at $9.71, up more than 0.5%. To the north side from where we are takes us to resistance and a potential take profit area, 988, 1002, 1017. To the south side, 959. This gap forms at roughly 946, closes out at roughly 936. Negative 2 standard deviations where price stays usually within negative 2 and 2 standard deviations. That is 931. Support and a potential bounce area, 916. 909 or 908, I put 896. And I did buy some at 790. There is another gap that I have been tracking that will take us to $11.29. I'll just pull this to the end of the week because I am tracking, again, only gap plays for the end of the week. This one, I actually started this gap, I looked at this trade on the 18th, so I carried it over. SOFI, WMB, SLB, and I believe BABA are carryovers from another video I did that I've been tracking some gap plays, and I will carry it over to the next week unless it closes out because I won't track it for a new gap. I'm just tracking some of the old gaps and then starting a new list. And I think that's it. All right. The next one is WMB. I bought in at 34.68. Right now we are at 35.14, up almost a 0.5%. To the north side from where we are takes us to 35.47. This gap forms at 35.65, closes out at 35.81. 4 standard deviations is 35.87. I tracked this again for that other video I made. And we've been all over the place, but we have not closed this gap to the upside. Now, to the south side, this gap forms at roughly 35.09, and 35.07 is the middle of the trend, so it's basically the same thing. And right here is where I bought in, and we are at this is -2 standard deviations. -3 standard deviations is roughly 34.48 and 34.27. If you can beat my price, that would be amazing. But I will be selling out once I hit this. And normally what I do when I see a gap is I will close it out either to the next standard deviations and keep my fingers crossed, but that's not a really good way to play it. I typically go 1 or 2 pennies over this amount, over the gap. That typically closes out when I do that. And I've done it many times. All right, the next one is MO. Again, I'm looking at this on the 5-minute time frame. If you are investing, you'll definitely want to pull out to the 1 hour, the weekly, and the monthly. Oops, stay on page. I've tracked this many times in the past. These are old support and resistance lines that I have not deleted, but I should. And these gaps have also, as I look at them, closed out. This one to the downside. Consolidation rips up. Closed out. There was a gap here that closed out as well at 41.98. And then what did we do? We hit resistance, falls apart. To repeat the cycle all over again. So here we are, $40.36. I will mark this level out. One target price, 40.72, 41.16. This closes out at roughly 41.35. Excuse me, it begins and at 4 standard deviations, 41.60, and it closes out at 42.40. MO pays a very nice dividend yield here. To the south side from where we are takes us back to the middle of the trend. You can count on it returning back to this area, 39.81. -2 standard deviations, 38.92. Support, potential bounce area, 38.48 and 38.03. But I will anticipate this gap to close hopefully by the end of the week, if not maybe the following, if we continue to go up in the stock market. But right now we are in a downward channel. So what I might do is mark out the middle of the trend and support and resistance and see if we make it back down to these levels. The next one, SLB. We ended the week at, what was it, 53.08, up nearly 1%. To the north side from where we are takes us to 53.73, 54.17, 54.58. I started tracking this for a gap play back then, and we have not closed the gap that I've been tracking to the north side. And it formed here on the 6th, November 6th. Closes out at 56.39. And once we close out this gap, I will not track it again until there's another gap. Now, to the south side. So the middle of the trend, and in this case, support is at 52.88. I will anticipate a bounce as we hit this area, 52.60. Closes out at that gap, and 52 roughly 51.56 and 51.16 to the south side. And watch out for the other landmines to the south side. Go and take a look at this again on the bigger time frame to look for any other gaps to the north side or to the south side. But right now I'm just trying to keep it in the window where it could potentially hit. But although we are ways off on this one, it's just something to be aware of. Really, we're just playing in -2 and 2. Anything outside of it is an outlier, but we will slowly stair step our way up or down. The next one is BABA. This crashed and burned a while ago, but hopefully things will pick up. We ended the week at 75.28. I also own this stock. We are at the middle of the trend. To the north side takes us to 76.25. This gap closes out at 76.70. Another one forms at 3 standard deviations, and that is roughly 76.79. And 4 standard deviations takes us to 77.27. This one I said 7.28. There we go. Let me just move that. It starts to look like a hot mess because we have so many gaps to fill. And this one here, and I'll clean up the chart later. 78.46, where I anticipate price will go to. But right now, we need to hit 2 standard deviations and stay at this level. But once we hit here, there will be a fallout as people take their profits and they run. And to the south side, -2 standard deviations, 74.25, 73.76. This gap forms to the south side at 73.65. This closes out at 72.54, but -4 standard deviations takes us to roughly 73.24. All right. SBUX. I have marked out this stock many times. I should start deleting some things, but I have yet to do that. I am in this trade for my mom. All right. To the north side takes us to 95.89, 96.55. There's a gap that I've been tracking that starts at roughly 96.85. 4 standard deviations, 97.20. This gap closes out at 97.64, roughly. All right, previous support and resistance lines. So ignore that. Middle of the trend takes us back to 94.54, 93.24, 92.57, and 92-ish. There's a gap to the south side that forms at roughly 91.72, closes out at roughly right about there. And the time frame that I'm looking at is the 26th, so right about there. To about, I've got a glare on my computer screen. Oh, I already marked it out. I was going to drag this over a bit. I'll just delete that. The next one is going to be Oracle. Actually, this is also a carryover because the gap did not close yet from a previous video I did. So here are some targets for Tuesday. 106.77, 107.29, 107.82, and this gap closes all the way out at 114.90 from when I talked about it over here. That would be an 11% return if we make it to that line. But notice we are not in this channel, not in this zone. We are a ways off. This is just the potential for this. Lots of movements to the upside and crashing and burning to the south side. Like right here, there's a landmine as well. So we'll be all over the map, but that provides an opportunity to do a swing trade from -2 to 2 standard deviations all day long. 105.70 takes us back to the middle of the trend. 104.86, this gap closes to the downside at roughly 104.29. Starts at roughly 104.70. Okay, so again, that's the middle. This gap forms at -2, is close to -2 standard deviations, which is 104.62. 104.06 and 103.50, 103.57-ish. And that's the beginning of the week right here. And did I mark the end of the week? Yes. So this is the zone I am tracking. Nike, this crash and burned. You know the saying, you go woke, you go broke. This crashed and burned. And I actually do own this, but I do anticipate it will in the future go back up because they are doing some major cost cutting things, trying to make the stock go back because it's bad. And they're cutting, I believe they are cutting employees as well. Once they do that, just like Facebook ran like crazy, and 108, ignore all these lines, okay? You know that they are previous support and resistance lines that I have tracked for a very long time. All right. This is where we ended. Hit the arrow once I click on that. Oops, up. Oh, darn it. There we go. All right, there's a gap right here. We crashed on Friday to the downside. So that means there's a potential gap to the upside. So the middle of, well, actually, let me mark this out really quick. If you've never marked out a gap, this is a way to do it here. All right, let me give you some levels for Tuesday and then the potential for the gap closures. To the north side, the gap forms at 110.15. The middle of the trend, 110.90, 118.31. Ignore these lines. Wait, is that another? Oh, those are old price targets. All right, this gap closes out. Look at this. This is why I do not like TradingView. I need to get something else. If you know of a better charting website, let me know. I just did some things, made some quick movements, and then they lose my indicators. Happens to me all day long, and it drives me batty. Now I have to change this to 2 because I want 2, 3, and 4 on my deviations. Okay. And then I have to change my color because I like to color code everything. Different colors, easier on the eye. I've got a terrible glare on my computer. All right, let's do this again because I got distracted. Close this out. And $118.29. 3 standard deviations closes out that gap basically at 122.40. Then the next target, 125.36. But anytime we're up in this area, there will be some downward pressure. People will be taking their profits and run. So just know that. To the south side, 103.46. And roughly 99.74, another area of support and resistance that I have tracked. And look at that, another level of support and resistance that I have also tracked, 95.93. And I need to go quickly through these other ones because this is dragging on too long. I want to go fast here. I will clean everything up later with this. I'll just leave that at 223. You click on this and then point the arrows up and down to change the price to be in line with the end of the day. So we've got that. This gap forms here, roughly, closes out roughly here. That's a little too high. All right. $224.35. The gap closes out at 225.33 and 226.08. Back to the middle of the trend, 226.62, 220.86, 220.03, and 219.14 for lows. The next one, CrowdStrike. We are at 255.63. This gap forms to the upside at 256.84, closes out at 2 standard deviations, 257.30, 258.40, and take your money and run 259.53, 254.92, 252.64, 251.48, 250.31, and finally NVDA. All right, a lot of people have been burned by this ticker. 488.30, basically at the middle of the trend there. To the north side, 494.29. A gap forms to the north side, 497, 498.17, and it closes out at 582. And 4 standard deviations, very close, 501.87. To the south side, 486.96. This gap closes out at roughly, again, I'll change out the colors later, 479.56, 475.93, 472.17. And that is a look at all of the gap and goers that I will be tracking for the week. Thank you so much for watching.